Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about The Lost Room episode 4. It's called The Box. So spoilers for the episode as always, and this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Fletcher for making the pick. So last episode ended with them finding the real motel, or well, Joe seeing it for the first time, of course. Wally knew it was there, but that was the cliffhanger at the end of episode 3. It was an exciting cliffhanger, and I think this episode did a good job of delivering on the mystique and the intrigue of this real version of the motel. Because right away, there's no room 10, which is the room, right? The room that he always goes into, the magic version of the room. There is no real version of that room. It only goes up to 9. Maybe it used to have a 10th, maybe it didn't. It's hard to tell. No one knows for sure, seemingly. At least at this point in the episode. Later on, we do talk to a character who used to work at the real motel, which seems to indicate that there was never a 10. It was always only 9 rooms, and then one day someone found a key, which is an interesting little thing that it kind of gets into, is that, like, was there an event, right? Because it's like, you know, Wally says there was an event, and it was on May the 4th, right? 1961, I think he said. And something happened, and that's when everything started. But, like, the people running the motel, it sounds like nothing happened. Like they weren't aware anything was happening in the moment. It was only after the fact that it kind of felt like, well, something must have happened, but it wasn't like some cataclysmic thing that everyone was noticing at the time. At least that's what we hear from the guy who used to work there. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. Early on, there's kind of just this like trial and error of like, okay, how does this place work, right? Because it's like, it's derelict, it's run down. Joe goes into room 9, notably with the key on him, which of course he would have. Why would they have left it outside? But they go in the room, and for lack of a better word, there's like a ghost who comes up and like sort of grabs at him and is saying something that's kind of incomprehensible. And it's got this sort of distortion effect on it though, which, while I'm calling it a ghost, and maybe you could sort of argue and technically it is kind of a ghost, it feels more like some kind of glitch or anomaly, like almost like it's like, okay, this is obviously a person who is trapped in here somewhere, but it's more about being trapped in time and space than it is the spirit of someone who has died previously. And as the episode goes on, that actually, it gets into that a bit more, and you get this sense of, you know, who this woman is, why she's here, and so on. But you know, this actually hurts the two characters. Both Joe and Wally start like feeling a lot of pain. They leave. And then Joe tests just going into the room, but holding the key outside the room, and nothing happens. And he realizes that this reaction is at least partially caused by the key getting in the room. So they want to get more evidence, though, or at least Joe does. So they like rig up a skateboard with a camera on it with the key taped to it. So and they send that into the room, and they just hold a rope to the skateboard. And Wally doesn't believe any of this. Also, Wally never saw the woman either. It seems like only Joe saw her because he was the one with the key. At least that's what my assumption is. And then there is some ruckus. They pull the thing back out. The camera's been destroyed, but they're able to get the footage later on, and they see her again. So they've got like an image of her. They can compare and show people and whatnot. But it definitely confirms that there's something weird going on, and it leads going into the town that's nearby, and there's hardly anyone there. And who is there? Like, they've got a bit of an attitude, and Wally kind of explains it that, you know, the reason why there's hardly anyone here is because whatever happened at this motel, like, it did sort of spread a feeling around the area that made people go a little bit mad, and most of them left because they felt that way, and the ones that are still here just don't know why they feel that way, or something to that effect is what he said. There's a couple of funny bits here though. Wally had actually wrote in spray paint, well, obviously it is Wally, but we don't know that's this at first, but there's like a spray paint over like the diner where it says, oh, this isn't hell, this is New Mexico, the bus station's this way. And I love that, the idea that he sends so many people here with the bus ticket that he's made a message to be like, hey, you're not in the afterlife, you're just in a different state, bus is over this way. That was pretty funny, and Wally looked quite proud of himself. And then the reason why some of the locals think the motel's haunted is because people keep coming over the hill who say that they think they're in hell, And again, at that moment, like, Joe just glances over at Wally, and Wally's got this sort of like little like, what a scamp I am. I've built up a whole mystique in this town just by sending people here over and over again. But it does make sense though that the bus ticket does send some, like, the location that it sends people to is near the real hotel. That does make some sense actually. It's not just a random spot, you know? So anyway, in the diner, they see a photograph of this woman that was in the room, and it's like, who is that? We have to find out. And Joe ends up talking more to Jennifer about it. She doesn't recognize her, but she does get really concerned when Joe mentions that he went to the actual motel. Because going to the motel with certain items is what turned her brother the way he is, right? He's in a mental hospital now, he's very confused, and she's hoping to one day wake him up. And she tries to make Joe promise to not go back there because she's worried about him, and Joe says, look, this woman is trapped somewhere outside of time and space, and she might be trapped in the same place that my daughter is, so if I can bring her back, maybe I can bring my daughter back too. And it's not like terrible logic, right? They're obviously connected in some way, although later on someone does point out that, you know, once we find out how this woman ended up in there like that, it's not the same situation as his daughter. Like the daughter went into the room and the door got shut. That's specific, and it's very differently specific to what happened to this woman. But it shows the determination. It shows kind of the risks of like these objects being close together and what it can do to someone if the right combination isn't there, and all that kind of stuff. But I liked a lot of this setup. I liked kind of the mystery of this woman in the room. It felt like a new chapter or a new layer in the mystery that was a little bit different. And it feels like we're getting into the history of the location now, which feels again like a natural next step to take. The only real thing that I would critique a little bit here in this episode is that when she goes in with Joe to the room, which she's a little bit hesitant to at first, but when she goes into the room with Joe and she's got all the research that her brother had about the motel, it gets romantic, and she kisses him, and, you know, we smash cut to them in bed together, post-coitus, and it's like this sweet kind of moment and all that. And I have to admit, like, as much as it's very clear that they were always going to maybe go down this path because they're the two leads, or he's the lead and she's clearly the love interest, there's been a little bit of chemistry. It did kind of feel relatively out of nowhere in this episode to just go straight to the sex. It kind of felt like, oh, we've not really necessarily built up to this, outside of just, you know, they're both attractive people, and I guess why wouldn't they? I was about to say something stupid there. I guess it doesn't matter, but I was wondering if they have unprotected sex in the motel room, once they leave and go back in, does that mean that they can't get pregnant because it's in the motel room and everything resets? I don't think that applies to their own bodies, so never mind that. It was just a weird thought in my head. I'm sure they were safe. They don't get into the nitty gritty. I'm sure they were safe. But it does give Joe a reason to go into the bathroom and kind of like freshen up, and he sees like a fingerprint on the mirror, and because of this, he's like, "Hey, get all your stuff. Let's go out and come back in, because if that fingerprint's here on a fresh reset, then it means it belonged to someone back then." And he looks into it, and yeah, and we get like a funny bit where he uses the door and the key to get into the fingerprint like database at the police station, and like they realize someone's broken in, and someone even points out, why does Joe Miller still have a login? And the IT guy's like, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on, didn't get around to it yet, which is maybe the most believable thing ever. But all of this, the romance stuff aside, which like, is this fine, there's nothing wrong with it, it just kind of feels a little bit like it doesn't really matter that much, outside of just like, oh, they're kind of bonding and they want to help each other, I guess. But the mystery there is very good, and it's very enticing, and it leads to a character that actually we already ran into in the episode. The fingerprint ends up belonging to this guy who lives near the motel, and Joe and Wally passed by him on the way to the diner earlier on, and he turns out used to work in the motel, and that woman who's in room 9 of the motel is his wife. And you know, he's very kind of, you know, confrontational up front first, and Joe's got a gun pointed at him to make him talk, but the tone changes quite quickly when he starts talking about the past, and he's very upset about it, and he seems very heartbroken to hear that Joe's daughter's in a similar position. He seems quite upset by that, because this is something that's traumatized him, and we get some cool old like footage from 1961. Basically, the initial group that started collecting items was him and his wife and a bunch of friends, and they found the key one day, and they found other stuff, and because room 10 didn't actually exist. I mean, they had the magic key to get into the magic room 10, but because room 10 doesn't exist in the real world, she started experimenting with room 9 instead. And seemingly, it's the watch box, which at first I was like, what do you mean watch box? But they literally just mean a box that a watch comes in. For some reason I thought it was some weird mechanical box type clock or something, but no. Just the case for the watch, that if you buy like a nice watch. And it's like something to do with that caused this, right? When that was opened in room 9, it caused something, and we see on the footage that everyone in the radius all starts like having like, not seizures, but they all start holding their head, they're all down on the ground, they're in pain. Not too dissimilar to like what Joe and Wally felt when they went into the room and the woman appeared to them. And ultimately, like, she effectively sacrificed herself by getting into the room on her own, and I guess, you know, presumably closed the box to end everything, but it seemed to trap her in some kind of cycle. In fact, when Joe wants to find the box, he goes to the same lady that what's his face, Ruber went to a couple of episodes ago when he was looking for the glasses. And she explains that it stops entropy within a radius, meaning that nothing can decay around it. And I also assume that just means that time doesn't quite move forward, and that's why this woman looks the same age still in that room. And it's kind of interesting because it's like, okay, the key is essential because that's what's making her appear when they go in. The watch box is important because that's the thing that put her in this position in the first place. And it's actually when Jennifer goes to her brother, and her brother like draws the comb to sort of say, hey, this was the thing that I was missing when I went into that room. This is important. She gets the comb back from her group, and it's like all three of them together is going to be the big thing. That's going to be the thing that ultimately deals with this, where, yeah, just like before, when Jennifer and Joe go in, you know, everything gets painful, they're freaking out. You can't really understand the woman, like she's sort of screaming like, oh, are you the man in the picture, and he's like, what picture, what are you talking about? But ultimately Jennifer's like, use the comb, so he does, right? And this is probably my favorite part of the episode, the way that all the different items come together, is that the comb pauses time, as was set up last episode, and this basically pauses everything, and all of a sudden the woman's not jittering anymore, she's acting in normal time with Joe, and she says thank you, because it seems like this is going to let her move on and leave finally. And she says, I saw your daughter, Joe, she's waiting for you. And, you know, it's like obviously it's a moment for Joe to confirm that she's still alive somewhere, so there's hope of finding her. But I like that at first glance, this looked like a ghost, and then it turned out to be more of like a trapped in time kind of thing. And then these different items, like the item that stops time ended up being the clue to sort of get her out of it. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of, you know, just the way things brought together. Of course, I've glossed over a couple of details here that I was intentionally leaving out till last, but I'll finish up on the Joe plot here. Is that he gets out the Polaroids that he got from like last episode, and one of them like sees something that isn't there, right? And you realize that when he starts looking through the Polaroid, like, and he's walking around the edge of the motel where room 10 would be, in the Polaroid, in the picture, you can see room 10 as if you're inside it, and it's like a view, like almost like a little TV where it's like live showing what would be in front of it. And all the items are all in the place that they're supposed to be, or at least some of them are. And he's looking around, and eventually, based on what the woman said, is we're expecting to see someone, the man in the picture. So eventually, yeah, he spins around, and we see this mysterious man who's there, and Joe thinks he's the prime object, that the person in the photograph, the person who was in room 10 when the incident happened, is the prime object, which, you know, begs a lot of questions, because if room 10 was never real, then who would be in there a regular human being or just someone who looks like a human being and is actually, I don't know if we're doing something like angelic here. Are we doing something with an alien? Are we doing something with, I don't know, but like it could literally be a lot of things. This guy could turn it to be a lot of things, and it's tough to say. Why would he be there otherwise? That's super fascinating. This was a good hook to kind of end on for the most part. That said, though, I mentioned they had the watch box, and that's not something they had at the start of the episode. They had to get that. So there's a whole extra side to this episode with our man, what's his name? Martin Ruber, right? The one who betrayed him. He's joined this cabal, and he starts the episode off with like being told to pray to the items they have. They have like 6 or 7 items on like a little table, and they had the glasses that he got for them, and it's like, hey, pray to this, and you believe that we're going to talk to God if we put all these items back together. And he's like, yes, I believe it. And she tests that by like holding up the deck of cards, which is another item, which basically flashes images of the room and maybe some other stuff at him, and it's like really intense. So he flies back in pain and holds his head screaming, and she's like, hey, like, you're pathetic and you're arrogant, you can't handle that, but I'll let you live because you were like me. Thank me for my mercy, but in time you will learn to believe truly. What's interesting though, so the suggestion there is that if he believed entirely, it wouldn't send him back in pain like that. But if you pay attention to the scene, all of the members of the cabal in the room and herself, they all like look away and cover their eyes, as if to say that it would still have an effect on them. Maybe not as harsh, but it's not like they're immune to it, seemingly. So, it feels like this is just, again, more cult-like activity more than anything else. But they want to get the key back from Joe. He's like, hey, he wants to kill me. That'll lead us to him. He calls Joe, says, I want to talk to you about your daughter. Joe meets him. It kind of goes nowhere. It's just a meeting on a bus in a public place. But later on, when Joe finds out he needs the watch box, he hears that this cabal has it from the broker lady who looks stuff up on the computer, who, by the way, is very excited to see the key and very excited that Joe walks in the door, comes back out with the money, and is all very impressed by it. But when he realizes this same cabal is the one that the Ruber's at, he's like, oh shit, I guess I can use him. So it's a very natural lead on from what happened earlier, where he goes to Ruber and says, hey, I need something, I need an item that the cabal has, and Ruber just wants to be let in the room. So he's not even that loyal to the cabal, seemingly. He's willing to just kind of like do stuff behind their backs to get what he wants. Why he's so obsessed is, maybe up for debate perhaps, but he basically agrees to steal it for him, right? It takes a little bit of convincing, but he does. He goes into the room, which you'd think would be better guarded, actually, in the secret cabal headquarters, but he gets the watch box. He also takes the deck of cards as well, and it just so happens that during all this, because they know Joe looked at this guy's fingerprints in the police computer, they know that he's probably going to be at this guy's address in New Mexico. So they actually go there to greet him, and Joe gets arrested. He gets questioned a little bit. Lee, the cop lady who's been kind of chasing him, is like, hey, I know you. Why are you doing all this? Like, turn yourself in, yada, yada, yada. And he's like, you wouldn't understand if I told you. And the last person I told ended up dead. So, I'm not going to do that. But it's when they're leaving the station where Ruber shows up with a deck of cards and just flashes it at their faces, and they all go down in pain. They can't handle it. So that's how they get away from the police. But what I loved about this plotline, though, with Ruber specifically, is that once he's with them and he's there when they're, he doesn't go in the room when the ghost lady's talking to Joe, but he's there for all the photograph stuff. And then after the photograph stuff, because the police are showing up, they all dive into the room, right? They use the key, they get in the room. And Ruber, the second that Joe and Jennifer have got their backs turned, you see him holding up the deck of cards behind Joe's head and like just waiting for him to turn around. And when they turn around, it doesn't work. And Ruber's like, huh? And Joe's like, the items don't work in the room, and just punches him like 3 times, like he deserves it. Like, he's such a little weasel. He tried to betray him immediately. And I kind of love that this is almost like a running gag, because the villain from episode 1 and in episode 2 did this kind of the same thing, where he tried to use his pen or whatever and it didn't work in the room. It's almost like this running thing of like, it's showing people are willing to betray you, so there's no point in trusting them. Now, admittedly, this guy killed his partner. There was no reason why we'd ever completely trust him, but it's like, oh no, you might have been given some, like, I don't know, amicable kind of truce to a certain extent, but you were a sleazy snake who tried to turn your back or backstab us immediately. So he throws him out. He does manage to steal the photographs on his way out, Ruber, but Joe's like, doesn't matter. We need to find this man in the photo. I think he's the prime object, and that's kind of the big ending point of the episode. So yeah, there was a lot to, do you know what? For a 42-minute episode, there was a lot to describe there. There was a lot to kind of like say, because there's a lot of moving parts to like the lore, right? You've got the room, you've got the ghost lady, you've got the ghost lady's husband who just kind of wants to put her out of her misery. You've got the cool old footage of what happened with these items and how mad it made everyone go. And you've got kind of the solution of like, oh, this one item kind of counteracts the other one or causes a different effect in the other one. Like, I like that stuff quite a bit. And then the idea that this photo sees the room as it was at like sort of the inception point, and there's a mysterious man in the room, I think also is a cool next step to the mystery of like, okay, I genuinely don't know how much this show is going to explain or completely flesh out why the room exists or what caused it. And I don't even necessarily think it needs to per se. But from a pacing perspective in a 6-episode show, it feels like every episode has added another layer. It's like it's giving me these extra layers every single episode, so it's always evolving, and I always feel like it's adding more to it. And it doesn't just feel like I'm leaving with the same status quo that I started with. This is something that knows that it's writing for an ending, and it's getting there. And there's only 2 episodes left, so that's kind of cool. It's exciting. So yeah, I mean, I like those moments. I think the romance part of it just kind of feels like because we have to, because it's a TV show in the mid-2000s, rather than because it really feels like it's necessary. Like they could just have like a platonic relationship that maybe has a hint of, hey, maybe we're attracted to each other at the very end, and that would be perfectly adequate. But yeah, I mean, whatever, it's fine, you know. Because the thing with Ruber is that I'm actually really liking all of Ruber's stuff now that he's been set up. But yeah, his actual turn to the dark side was a little bit weird and kind of rushed. But well, now that he's been established though, and he's doing all this stuff, and he's a little slime ball, and he's using the items, like I'm enjoying that stuff play out and how it's bouncing off of Joe and everything that he's trying to do. So no, it felt different again, and it had its little moments of humor, which is nice. But the actual sort of like the myth of like, oh, the woman in room 9 and why is she there? And it's like, no, she's just been stuck there in some sort of weird time warp ever since she used the box in like 1961. It's you know, it's like, it appears supernatural, but then it's more kind of like absurd science fiction once you actually get into it. Having said that, there is, I guess, a supernatural quality to everything about the room and the items to some extent because of the things they can do. But I compare it a bit more to science fiction just because it feels like there's more hard rules, even if we don't understand all the hard rules yet. But there is all these rules and these functions that you can kind of like predict and use in different ways and how they'll bounce off of each other. So, no, I had a good time with this episode. I think it's is it, I mean, is it the best one yet? It might be. I don't know. It's tough to say because I think the way that they use the items to problem solve in each episode is really good. Or in this case, they use the items to problem solve the room and its weird qualities. I always enjoy when they do that, right? And it almost makes me sad that this is just a 6-episode limited series. I know there was a short, like, second TV show like later on, but people don't seem to think it was as good, and you know, it was never built to be a long form thing necessarily. So I don't know. We'll see. But again, we obviously have the group that Jennifer's from. We have the Cabal that Ruber's involved with, and then we've got the Collectors, who were the original group who were trying to collect items, seemingly not for any nefarious purposes, just for, I don't know, the interest of them, really, of the excitement of thinking they're important or whatever. as opposed to like the extremes of the two groups that we're following in present day. I say two. There's actually a third group because you've got the guy who owned the antique shop with the house. Yeah, he's also there as a third entity. But we haven't seen him in an episode or two though, so we'll see how that works back into things as we go along. So no, excited to see how we further kind of deal with some of these roles and maybe understand where the daughter even is, because it feels like the fact that we got kind of close here with this woman who was trapped in some kind of, I don't know, like time warp or time bubble or something, whatever you want to call it. I think that's a very interesting. It's like we're getting really close to the idea of being able to get someone out of there that's been in there. But she's been in there for 40 plus years at this point, and in pain. But yeah, so hopefully the little the Elle Fanning isn't screaming in pain in all of her waking days. But I guess we'll find out when Joe gets to her, which I'm assuming he's going to. So that is my thoughts on episode 4 of The Lost Room. Let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below if you've seen it. Like, subscribe, all that stuff helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support everything over at patreon.com/MaleFuzzTV. Thank you once again for watching or listening. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?